Well, good. Let's move into some of our content for this evening about some of the ways that we're going to talk about that your church really does have more money than you realize. And again, we want to help you unlock some of those resources so you can be more fully about the work that God is calling you to, the mission, the ministry that God's calling your church to. So let's go ahead and get started with grants.
All right. Well, everybody might know what a grant is, but then again, maybe we need a refresher on that, AJ. Help us to understand what a grant is and where does it come from?
Sure. So a grant is a gift. It's a gift of money that comes from an outside organization for a specific purpose. So it's a gift of money for a specific purpose from an outside partner. It's different from a loan in that a grant is not required to be paid back. And one of the most helpful things for people to understand is that the parameters of the grant are solely at the discretion of the grant funder. So the funding organization is typically going to have some very specific parameters and criteria about who is eligible to apply, what qualifies for grant funding versus what doesn't. And this is going to be based on the grant funder's own priorities and policies. So one type of grant that most of us are probably familiar with is a scholarship. And I think if you can understand how a scholarship works, you can really understand how grants work generally. So scholarships are going to be awarded very specifically, maybe to persons from a particular region, attending a particular school in a certain field of study. I was in a conversation earlier today with one of our United Methodist students who is going to seminary. He was asking about some scholarships. Obviously, there are scholarships specifically for him as a United Methodist headed off to seminary. And so if you can keep in mind, scholarships are going to be very specific. With that in mind, I think it's a pretty safe bet that Duke University is not going to fund a scholarship for a student who's going to study at Chapel Hill. Fair assessment, right? Chapel Hill is a fine school, but a Duke funded scholarship is going to go to a Duke funded student because those funds are earmarked for a specific purpose, according to the priorities of the organization that's providing the funds. So when you're filling out a grant application, we'll get to where to find those in a minute. But when you're filling out a grant application, one of the most important things that you can do is to state, clearly demonstrate how what you're asking funds for clearly aligns with the stated criteria of the grant. So if the grant has a very specific criteria, make sure that as you're writing the grant application, you are clear about the connection and how that project that you're asking to be funded meets those particular criteria. It's also good to know about the landscape of kind of grant making. At this point in the game, most funders probably are not going to be providing funds for brick and mortar type projects. They're not going to provide funds for deferred maintenance or staff salaries or ongoing operating expenses. And a lot of times we'll hear from folks that they want grants for those things, and I understand those. That's a big need, but the majority of grant funders are probably not going to be interested in funding those particular things at this time. That's just not where their priorities are.
Great. Okay. Well, that brings this up right away. How do you find out about these grants?
Read your email. That's that's one of the most important things that I can tell you all as church leaders. If you're a local church leader and you receive the conference weekly e-news, if you receive updates from us at the foundation, there are often lots of funding opportunities for various kinds of projects and ministries found within those communications. I'm aware that can be a little bit like the church bulletin. There's good info in there, but you actually have to read it if you want to be able to get some of that information. I say that being just as guilty as anyone else about asking about things that have been in the bulletin for weeks that I didn't pay attention to. So my own hand is up on doing that sometimes. One really good way to find grants. So several months ago, a couple of my colleagues at the foundation conducted an excellent grant finding workshop, and it was recorded. And when you get your session materials, when you get the resource list that's going to be sent to you after the session, we have included a link to that recording. And I am super proud of my team and the work that they did on this. It's a great resource if you are just trying to figure out, how do I even find grants? Everybody should go and take a look at that particular recording. Right now, the foundation is also receiving applications for grants from the Reynolds Ministry Fund, and there's information right on the front of our website, umfwnc.org. That's also in the resource list if you haven't seen it yet. There's information about those grants. This fund was created through the generosity of the late Royce and Jane Reynolds of Greensboro. They are deeply committed United Methodists with a passion for seeing the church thrive. And all grants from the Reynolds Ministry Fund are specifically for projects and initiatives that specifically seek to make disciples of Jesus Christ. So if there is something that your church wants to try out, an idea that you want to see if it can get some legs and get some support that is geared toward making disciples of Jesus Christ, we would love to see an application for a grant from the Reynolds Ministry Fund.
That's really good news. Sometimes it's hard to figure out what might qualify. So could you share some of the things that grants have helped some local churches to succeed in doing besides making disciples in our conference?
I have seen grants go out for home repair ministries, feeding ministries, childhood literacy initiatives, youth ministries, fellowship, skill training for vulnerable population groups, clergy training programs, and evangelism. Many of your churches during the pandemic, you may have benefited from one of our grant offerings that helped churches upgrade their technology to make the switch to online worship and to streaming. So we provided grants for churches to buy cameras or buy other equipment, recording equipment, maybe upgrade their internet capabilities so they have the bandwidth to do online services. So where there's a need out there, specifically things that help make disciples of Jesus Christ, that's been a place that we have been very intentional to try and do a lot of strategic investing.
AJ, maybe this is a good time to mention, there's also, been a lifelong Methodist and I didn't know this until recently. And I was on a missional engagement grant committee. And so that's not, I've been surprised how few people take advantage of that.
Thank you. Yeah, as is often the case, there are grant funds every year from a variety of sources that just go unclaimed. And sometimes it's because people don't know that the grant opportunity exists. And those are often highlighted in the e-news, in the conference email that goes out. But yeah, there are all kinds of opportunities. So, in addition to talking to us at the foundation, talk to Kim Ingram's office, talk to some folks in the conference office, talk to your district superintendent about the kinds of things that might be available if you've got a specific project in mind. Ken, thanks for pointing that out.
Fresh Expressions is also one that's widely available for small amounts to take on new initiatives.
Yeah, it's a chance to try something new, right?
Yes.
Good.
So we've already sort of added the idea that there are layers and like little pots wandering around in the conference, so to speak. Not that they're wandering, we're wandering to find them. So it's more than one Lucky Charm pot. We've got conference level, foundation level, missional engagement, fresh expressions, district level. That's really, I think the exciting part is that there's lots of pots out there for us to learn about to make a thing. So just remind us again how many of these things are funded.
So at the foundation, we're deeply blessed by donors who have entrusted significant resources to the foundation over the years, often earmarked for specific purposes, specific churches, specific ministries. People like Royce and Jane Reynolds, whom I mentioned earlier. And it is a real honor to be able to continue to grow their philanthropic legacy through the various grants that we offer. Bonnie mentioned the conference and the district also do give grants for various projects according to the priorities of those projects. And a lot of those, in many cases, come out of your apportionment dollars. And honestly, that's one of the things I just really love about our United Methodist connection, that we come together, we pool resources in order to do things that are above and beyond ourselves. I really think it's neat when a church is able to see their apportionment dollars at work in the church across town or the church across the street. Or sometimes even when they see those apportionment dollars come right back to themselves through some grand offering that they've received. So, I think that's really, really neat. We're stronger together. That's, kind of one of the things we're celebrating in these Equip and Connect seminars, but we are stronger together, and we're capable of more by standing together than any of us are capable of by standing alone. And that's one of the unique strengths of United Methodism. It's one of the things that makes me really proud to be a United Methodist.
Okay, so we've got everybody excited about the idea of doing a grant. The slide says for the foundation, we're looking at a February 1, so that's roughly 10 days away. What's my next best step to connect with that process and any of the others too?
Well, again, so what you see on the screen, if your church has an idea about making disciples of Jesus Christ, an initiative that you want to try, something new that you want to step out in faith, and you need some resources to do that, the Reynolds Ministry Fund is going to be a great source of grants for you for that. The deadline is February 1, so it is coming up quickly. But if you go to our website, there is an opportunity to get some information about that, download the form, download the grant requirements. You can also connect directly with Reverend Annalee Allen. Her contact info is going to be in the resource packet that you all get. Reverend Annalee Allen is our Director of Reynolds Ministries and Programs, and she would love to talk with you about your grant ideas and maybe what that would look like for you to submit a grant application. And again, I want to encourage everyone, view the recording of the grant finding webinar. It's going to be in your resource packet as well. Take a look at that. That's going to be an excellent primer in looking for and identifying various kinds of grants. I looked at it this morning. It is 48 minutes. So you can give up one night of Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune, and you can watch the entire grant finding webinar.
I'd like to add something to that, AJ. We were talking about wanting to do these things. Sometimes we might have a line item that is evangelism or relational evangelism, and we may have some money there. And what if we took a chance and applied for a grant, and lo and behold, we got it? Now you've got that money that you budgeted. Now maybe that money can go do something else. So the grant fluffs up your existing budget just for the effort to do that. And so that is terrific. Grants are a great resource. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer. We do remember that we don't always win the first one we try at. So don't give up. This is a process. This is a marathon, not a sprint. And I think if a church is willing to do that good work of studying the seminar you've got, the 48-minute wonder, writing for the grants, I think it'd be a great benefit. And yet at the very same time, one of the things I wonder and worry about is sustainability.
Yeah, let's get to that in a minute. I want to before we move on, Bonnie, if we've got any questions specifically about grants, let's take a moment just to hear those. One question we get frequently about the Reynolds Ministry Fund grants: are those available only to United Methodist congregations in Western North Carolina? Those are not. We have made grants from the fund to churches in other denominations and churches in other locations. One grant that we awarded in 2023 was actually to the AME Zion Church. They were doing a training program for some of their clergy in evangelism, and they had a great grant application. And we talk about who we are as Methodists and as Wesleyans, and recognize that we're connected to folks outside of our United Methodist family as well. It was a great opportunity for us to invest in the well-being of our brothers and sisters in the AME Zion Church. So yeah, that's some opportunities that are out there. Susan, I see that you have asked, and Annalee, you've answered it. The name of the contact person in our office, it's Reverend Annalee Allen. And again, in the resource packet that you get, her contact info is going to be in there. You can also go to our website. The website's there on the screen in front of you. And if you look under the staff listing, you'll find Annalee's contact info there as well, and would encourage you to reach out directly to Annalee. Yep. Other questions about grants or other things that folks here are curious about specifically with grants, or things you might want to add in? Great, Shawnee, thanks for putting Annalee's contact info there. I see that. Thank you. Good. Any questions about grants?
I'll just put in a plug. In my last church especially, I applied for grants all over the place to help fund a dinner church. And we got a lot of grants. We also had a pantry there at that church. And because we worked with other churches in the community, that was a big plus. So I'm a fan of grants. I recommend everybody to go out there and really search, because I have funded programs, quite a few programs, and help sustain them by applying again. So
You like that free money, don't you, Barb?
yes, I like that free money. Some grants do require you to send in a report at the end, but usually it's not hard, it's not a hard report, and you're usually excited about what's happened. So it's pretty easy to write.
Yep. Yeah, I know that's part of our process. We want to make sure the grant was used for what we awarded it for. Annalee, who's our staff member who oversees that ministry, every time she comes back from a grant site visit, she is pumped and excited because she got to go spend the day with people who are making disciples of Jesus Christ, and she's had a really good day when she gets to go out and follow up on those. Thanks. Good. Any other questions or comments that anybody wants to make about grants? All right.
AJ,
Yes.
AJ, might be a good time to mention endowments, and there may be some people on who might endow one.
It's like you were reading what I want to move to next, because we're going to move toward talking about endowments. So, Bob, you don't have my notes in front of you, do you?
No, in fact, I was wondering how I get a copy of them after we are done.
I'll make sure you get a copy of them. I'll be very happy to get them to you. So let's go ahead and make that pivot. So we've been talking about grants, and Bonnie mentioned it earlier, and we've already kind of hinted toward it. Sustainability, that is sometimes a concern when I see churches that are too dependent on grants. One of the things I worry about for them is they might be too dependent on outside sources. And that's hard, right? Grant funds might be available this year. They might not be available next year. The funding priorities of different grant funders might shift. There's always more folks applying for funds than there are funds available, more causes than there are for grant dollars to go around. And when you're living on grants, again, I think grants are a great source of income, but if we've got a ministry that's overly dependent on grants, there's always the concern that what you receive today may not be available tomorrow. So I think that's a very real concern.
All right, I'm going to nibble here then, AJ. Let's talk about that $5 word, endowment. Go ahead and give us a good explanation if you would.
So an endowment is you can think in some ways of an endowment as kind of like being your own in-house source of grants. These are funds that your church is in charge of. These are funds that belong to your church. You own it, you invest it, you draw funds out of it every year. No one's going to take it away from you because it is yours. It's a perpetual source of income that a church can count on above and beyond tithe and offering income. So when we talk about what an endowment is, very, very simply, an endowment is a pot of funds that's designed to last forever. You're going to treat it in such a way that the principal is always preserved, it grows over time, and it produces annual income at a reasonable rate. Always preserved, grows over time, produces annual income. And it becomes something that a church can count on as a source of resources, income for projects above and beyond what the church is already doing through tithes and offerings and things that it does in the general budget. Structurally, an endowment is really pretty simple, pretty straightforward. You invest the funds for long-term growth. At the foundation, we've got a fund that is specifically created for endowments. It's called our diversified fund. It's a mix of 70% stock, 30% fixed income. And it's actually the fund where the foundation invests all of our own endowments. That's how much we believe in it. We're putting our own resources invested in the very same thing, very same way that we've made available to our investment clients. Historically, over the last 10 years, the diversified fund has returned over 7% annually. So over 7% year over year. Some years are higher than that, some years are lower than that, but over the long term, that's a good return, 7% year over year. And our recommendation is that endowments spend 4% each year. And it's this combination of getting a 7% return and only spending 4%. That's the winning combination that ensures that an endowment is going to be able to last forever because it's earning at a higher rate than it's spending. So kind of the money that you have coming into the bucket is coming in at a faster rate than the money that's flowing back out of the bucket. You're essentially taking 4% out every year and you're reinvesting the other 3%. And so the fund is going to have an opportunity to grow over time while also allowing you to pull out some money every year to do ministry. So you're going to end up with a fund that provides growth and income at the same time. That's a setup that ensures that the endowment is still going strong and supporting the church long after any of us are here.
That's phenomenal. So what kinds of churches need to have an endowment?
Any church that plans to exist 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, any church that plans to have a future needs to have an endowment.
AJ, I've been the finance person at a couple of churches, and they both have these designated funds that are sitting off to the side, and few, if anybody, remembers what that money was really meant to be used for, and it usually just sits idle for years and years and years. Just listening to you talk, it made me think that this might be a good use for it to put it in an endowment and let the income stream maybe do something specific.
I think that's a beautiful opportunity for an endowment. If you've got funds that are not working for you, that they're not doing any ministry with, but if you can invest them in such a way and start using the earnings, that's a winning combination. Think about freeing those resources up, start putting them to work for projects and initiatives and things that the church needs to do. Absolutely.
But isn't an endowment something that really we kind of think of as only the really big churches and the really rich churches get to do stuff like that? It sounds kind of highfalutin finance, you know?
All right, Bonnie, read my lips. Any church that plans to exist in the future should have an endowment, regardless of size, regardless of whether it's urban, rural, regardless of the demographics, regardless of how well off they believe themselves to be. Any church that plans to exist in the future needs to be thinking about having an endowment ministry.
Hey, Jay, is there any minimum amount that required to start an endowment?
No. And that's actually one of the really unique things about an endowment. So we can start an endowment at the foundation with $0. And we've had a number of churches that will help them write the policy, will help them get things in place. But before the first dollar has even started to come in for their endowment, this is kind of their signaling their intent to create the endowment and to create the structure for it. But you can start an endowment with $0. You do not have to have anything to start an endowment.
Can I say that it works? We had an endowment that had a few $100 that the pastor at the time we started it, and I would put a little in each year. So it might just had a few $100, but we had a doctor, retired doctor, join the church. Our church really adopted him. This is a small church. And after his wife died, he decided to give us a bunch of stock. So he started that with the first $100,000. And we have spent some of it for various things, but we still have some of that money, and others occasionally add to it.
Yeah, and I mean, I know your church. I know the story. I mean, that's been a real game changer for your church to have that fund available that you all have been able to draw out of, and it's helped you expand your mission and ministry in some really neat ways.
Amen.
AJ, this is Kathy Burley from Gethsemane.
Hey,
We
Kathy.
recently came out a few months ago because we had a cemetery endowment, which was doing very well. And our minister does not live in our parsonage. So we've been renting our parsonage out for a couple of years. So we're getting income from that. And also we were holding money in a regular bank account for the reserves that were required to keep on tap for it. And AJ was able to, talk to our committees, and we moved that money over to a parsonage endowment, and also moved some of the cash that we're not using for the parsonage, our excess cash, to a money market savings. And I was so pleased when I started getting the statements, AJ. They look so good. I know I'm being optimistic, but to go from earning nothing almost, to getting a good return was very pleasing. So I encourage you to talk to OK if you got some money. And we're a very small church, so AJ really helped us.
That's thanks, Kathy. It's actually one of the things I love about the work that we do at the foundation is by providing the investment funds and very conservative or very aggressive or something in between. I mean, we have several different options, but it doesn't matter what size your church is. Everybody has access to the same funds, the same investment pool, the same performance. So if you're a small church, we're going to treat your money the same exact way, invest it the same exact way as we would if you're a really large church. And I love that we've got those options available to every church across the conference, regardless of their size, regardless of how much they bring to us. Everybody's got access to the same stuff. And I just really like that. So thanks.
I'd like to piggyback on that, AJ, because if you invest in the commercial or business world of stocks or with stock companies, almost all of them today have some very high minimums. They just won't talk to you unless you're bringing in a six-figure check. And so what AJ just said to us is jaw-dropping. And I know for a fact that he treats everybody as if it's a 7-digit check, when as just to say, let's just get started. Let's just start this and open this up and help people know. So that doesn't sound like much until you realize what it's really like out there in the investing world.
Well, we're a ministry, right? We're a nonprofit. Our mission statement is to build the church for generations to come. I am an ordained United Methodist pastor. We have 2 other United Methodist clergy on staff. We do this as a ministry to help churches, regardless of their size, regardless of their resources, help them be good stewards of their resources. And so we take that seriously, and that's why my feet hit the floor every morning, is to help our churches do just exactly that.
AJ, do you have any more great stories? And I really appreciate everyone's participation so far. Thank you, Kathy, Bob, everybody. Do you have another couple of great stories that you could share?
So yeah, I mean, folks often wonder, like, if we start an endowment, what do we use it for? And there are, you know, fundamentally creating an endowment and the income that comes off of it, it's about helping your church do more, with mission and ministry. So I think about church in our conference that has a very large historic building, beautiful building, that also happens to take a lot of money to keep running. Just the maintenance and the utilities and the expenses related to the building are very, very high. And this church was proud of their building. They were grateful for their building. They were grateful for, congregation who came 150 years ago, who built that building and have given them the place to worship and all the ministry that takes place within it. And they realized that if they could endow all of the expenses related to the maintenance of the building, if they could get all of those expenses coming out of the endowment, then what they gave to the church in terms of tithes and offerings could go more directly to mission and ministry. And not only them, but 100 years from now, their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, future generations of that church, everything that they gave was going to go to mission and ministry rather than the upkeep of the building. And so for them, they said, let's build our endowment to the point that all the expenses for the building come out of the endowment, so that each dollar that's given goes directly toward mission and ministry. A lot of churches will start what we call a general endowment, which doesn't necessarily have a specific purpose. So not for the building, not for scholarships, not for music, whatever, but it's a general endowment. And what this allows the church to do is to take distributions out every year that they can apply toward whatever they define as the greatest ministry need. And so ministry needs change from year to year. And for churches that don't have an endowment, I think a general endowment is the ideal place to start. It's the place where we as the foundation recommend that they start. Gives you a lot of flexibility to respond to changing ministry needs, direct funding where it's needed most. So maybe the greatest ministry need this year is a scholarship, and maybe it's supporting the youth mission trip the next year, maybe getting a new children's ministry program started, or some urgently needed repair to the building. And as ministry needs shift, as priorities shift, particularly over time, a general endowment gives the church lots of flexibility to be able to respond to those needs.
That's a cool idea. Some people are always a little concerned when we start talking about money, and there's a hidden worry that I've heard before where they think that an endowment might somehow siphon off some of the general budget giving. What has been your experience with that?
Yeah, and I think that's you don't want to rob Peter to pay Paul, right? I mean, you don't want to starve the general budget while you're supporting the endowment. And what I have come to realize, and experience bears this out, by and large, most of us make our gifts to the church, our tithes and offerings that support the budget. Most of us are going to make those contributions from our income. I think about having two different pockets. So like the pants that I'm wearing right now, I've got two pockets in the front. And on one side, I call that my income pocket. And money comes into that fairly regularly through my paycheck, maybe for others through their Social Security, through their retirement, through their pension. But money, comes into your income pocket pretty regularly. And money also goes out of your income pocket pretty regularly. You pay bills out of that. All of your regular kind of living expenses go out of that on a regular basis. And hopefully whatever you're giving to the church on a weekly basis, monthly basis, however frequently you do that, that's going out from the income pocket. But regular income comes into it, regular expenses, including your regular contribution to the church, goes out of it. So that's the income pocket, but over on the other side, I've got the asset pocket. And this is how people are generally going to fund gifts to your endowment. We're going to support the general budget from our income, but we're going to think about making gifts to the endowment out of our assets. And so I'm in and out of my income pocket all the time. Most of my regular expenses, my bills, all of that comes out of there. I don't go into my asset pocket nearly as much. And what kinds of things are in the asset pocket? You've got accumulated savings in there. You've got investments. You've got pieces of property, things of value that we own. Maybe we don't use that often. An extra vehicle, a collection of some sort. And I might think about donating these things to the endowment right here and now. And if I do that, I'm actually probably going to receive some pretty sweet personal perks. I mean, like a lower tax bill. Those are some of the immediate benefits that folks might get from donating assets into the endowment. In my asset pocket, there's also some things that I don't ever access or hardly ever. Maybe they're things that I need as long as I'm living, like my primary residence or my retirement account. Things I can't access as long as I'm alive, like a life insurance policy. But some of these might be things that I want to give to the church after I've joined the church triumphant. And I'm going to go, that's maybe the place where I can make a once in a lifetime gift, maybe even a once beyond a lifetime gift after I've joined the church triumphant. So if I'm considering a gift to the endowment, I'm going to look anywhere there in my asset pocket so I can make a gift to the endowment without taking away from my regular tithe and offering gift to the general fund. And the research is lived out. Experience shows it out that overwhelmingly having a robust endowment ministry that people are supporting from their assets doesn't negatively affect general budget giving. In fact, many times it helps to bolster general budget giving because people are excited about what the church is doing. People are excited that the church has a plan for the future. And that just kind of generates excitement and gratitude for who the church is. People are much more likely to actually also contribute regularly to your general budget through tithes and offerings with a good endowment in place.
Going back to the first slide you had, AJ, this might be a place where you could talk to the congregation about minimum, or what is it? The Social Security distributions, like the minimum that you have to withdraw. I mean, to some people that's found money, right? And that would be a good source for something like this.
Yeah, so for folks that are receiving an IRA who are age 73 or older and have to take a required minimum distribution from their IRA, you can actually direct up to $100,000 a year toward a qualified charitable distribution. Your plan administrator, whoever administers your IRA, can do that. But by directing it to charity rather than taking it as income, the donor can reduce their taxable income dollar for dollar. So it's a really nice kind of a winning strategy, especially if you've got someone who's going to donate to the church anyway, for them to use that required minimum distribution, do the qualified charitable distribution, which counts toward their RMD. So yeah, thank you.
So I guess the next big question is, how are we going to get people to make these major asset-based, not income-based gifts to the church? Do we just sit and hope and pray that they'll remember the church in their estate and legacy planning, or is there a better path?
Well, you absolutely hope and pray. We are people of faith, so of course we hope and we pray. But you also put things in place to make it more likely that people will want to remember the church in their estate plans, in their legacy planning, in those once in a lifetime gifts or once beyond a lifetime gifts. We have seen that simply having an endowment in place drastically increases the likelihood that someone is going to make a significant gift to your church, maybe a legacy gift, maybe a gift beyond their own lifetime. Why? Because an endowment signals to your donors that your church has a plan. An endowment signals to your donors that your church is thinking about the future. Your endowment signals to donors that your church is going to be intentional. Your church is going to be thoughtful with something that they give you. And if somebody gives you a gift, you're showing them that you've got a plan so that gift outlives all of us. Think about it. If I am considering giving some portion of my life's assets to the church, maybe something I have worked a lifetime for, and I have scrimped and I have saved and I've been frugal and I've been wise with my resources to have something that I can give to the church, it's going to give me some peace of mind to know that what I've worked hard for, the church is not going to spend in the next 15 minutes just trying to get current on the light bill. So it gives your donors some peace of mind about that. Without having an endowment in place, you are essentially telling major donors who might make a lifetime gift, who might make a legacy gift, that their gift would be better placed if they took it somewhere other than the church. So emphasizing the endowment demonstrates that your church is going to be thoughtful, it's going to be wise, it's going to be planful with major gifts that your donors make, and therefore it encourages people to make gifts that are going to outlive themselves.
Hey Jay, we touched on that we don't have to have a single dollar in place just to open up an endowment process. But there's another big question that I've heard many times, and that is confidentiality. This is the kind of stuff that we do not talk about, and we want to keep it that way, most of us. And so talk a little bit about how that's protected and how that is, how we help churches with that.
Yeah. So kind of at a high level, we can provide general, information and workshops with churches around various kinds of planned giving. So, people who are thinking of making those asset-based gifts, we'll come in and do general workshops and information sessions about that. We can go through gifts that are very simple, gifts people can make right now, to gifts that are a little more complicated and complex, just kind of depending what a donor's situation is. We can also meet confidentially with donors who are thinking of doing something significant for your church. And if someone has an idea of something they want to do, Donors' Bill of Rights is in place, and one of those is confidentiality. So if I sit at someone's kitchen table and talk with them about a gift that they're thinking of making, structuring it in a way that's going to benefit their church, that conversation is confidential. I legally, I can't report that to anyone else. I can't take it to the church. I can't take it to the pastor, can't take it to the finance chair, anybody else. That is a confidential conversation that we take very, very seriously. If the donor wants to share something about that conversation, they are welcome to, but we're just not able to do that, and we're not going to do that. So, we're going to sit with a donor and talk confidentially, compassionately, but also to hear specifically about their goals, their dreams, their desires, and see how we can maybe use some of their life's assets to create a gift scenario that's a win-win, both for them as a donor and their family, but also something for the church. So there's an old proverb that generous people are happy people, and I've got to tell you, to a person, that's been my experience. When I sit down with folks who are thinking about making those kinds of gifts, they are delighted to have an opportunity to do something significant, to do something generous for their church. This is not a burden for them. This is something that they are delighted to do. So generous people are happy people. Joy is an infallible sign of the presence of God. And so anytime I meet with a potential donor who's thinking of doing something for their church, it's a spiritual experience for me. And I feel like I've got to have an encounter with someone who's getting close to the face and the presence of God through this act of generosity.
Wow. That's good to know. I think that word needs to be spread as much as anything. If we can, let's just make sure that we're comfortable investing. Some folks have had some rough at times and experiences with investing, and when they hear that word, they get a little confused. Should we be in the business of investing? Is it too risky? So could you address that just a little bit?
Bonnie, I work for the foundation, and investing for churches is a really big part of what we do. So obviously I'm biased. I think investing is a wise and prudent thing to do. I think we go back to the parable of the talents that we read earlier. But Bonnie, let me turn it around. You're a layperson. You spent a career in insurance, literally mitigating risk. What do you think about investing?
Well, I can tell you plenty of insurance people don't like investing, but I'm not one of them. I will tell you, if you don't mind, that I didn't come from a family of stockbrokers. My parents experienced the bad side of the Great Depression, not the Great Recession, but Depression. And we also grew up in a house where we didn't talk about three things, and one of them was money. Now, I got a little bit of basic trading, but I was kind of left to fend for myself. And an opportunity came along, and I was afraid of making a big mistake. So I took it upon myself to learn a few magic things. I bought books before you got them delivered by Amazon, and I studied some of the 101s of investing. So what I learned is that I needed to have an emergency fund, access to cash. Still believe in that. I need to have a floating fund that's getting a conservative return. But I also looked at the long picture, and every chart I looked at in the book said that I needed to invest over a long period of time, and especially for my retirement. And later in life, I was actually licensed by the Securities and Exchange Commission to offer investment products through my company. And they gave us a set of charts, the Morningstar charts, and I learned something from one of the 12. And that was that if you look at the Dow Jones Industrial Average from 1906 to the present, if you will take a 20-year period like this, and you will move that from way back from the day of the Great Depression, there is no 20-year period that you did not gain on, no matter where you are in the chart, up to the most current one. Generally, they're 2 years behind. And I found that fascinating because we've had people say, "Oh, no. Yep, you can do that. That chart's still available. I think it's online now." So I believe in investing, and I'm able to be retired now, maybe a little earlier than a few of my peers, simply because I took the chance to learn about it, to take away my fears, the fear of the unknown, so that I could say, yes, I'm willing to invest this over a long period of time in a growth mindset, by the way. I chose that. So that's my idea about investing.
Thanks, Bonnie. And remember, I mean, the title of our session tonight is "Your Church Has More Money Than You Realize," and what we're talking about here is there is money in your church in people's asset pocket. Sometimes, it's there, but sometimes it's simply a matter of helping them realize it, and putting together a plan where they're going to see, how the church is going to use it 50, 100, 150 years from now. And so both in what's in people's asset pocket who are sitting in your congregation, but then also as you invest it and as you structure it, that's just a way that you can turn those resources into something much bigger that continues to generate resources for your congregation long after all of us who are on this call have gone on to the church triumphant.
So AJ, have you seen successful strategies? I mean, there's an old adage, you don't get anything you don't ask for. Have you seen any successful strategies where churches bring this topic to the forefront and talk to their congregation about it? One of the things we've tried in the past at another Methodist church I was at was holding, I want to say financial literacy classes, but it was where we'd have an investment banker come in and talk to the congregation about exactly what you just said. You got to have an emergency fund, you got to have savings, but it would eventually get to, and you need to plan for how you're giving to the church. So I'm curious, have you seen anything that works to do that?
So some of the lowest hanging fruit out there, just in your bulletin, your newsletter, your online newsletter, any of your publications that go out regularly, just include a line in there. Have you remembered Grace UMC in your estate planning or in your legacy planning, and just put it out there regularly in front of people. Yesterday, I was at one of the churches in our conference, met with their over 60 senior group to do a lunch and learn around planned giving and various kinds of gift options. And God bless them, on a Monday, cold Monday in January, 51 people came out yesterday. The lunch was really good, so that was a big draw. But they were there, and these are people who love their church and who care about their church and want some good guidance on things they can do that are wise for themselves, but also things they can do for their church. Some of you who are on the call, I mean, I've come out and done plan gift workshops with members of your congregation as well. So if you've got a lunch and learn, if you've got a particular Sunday school class, if you've got a leadership team, there are all kinds of formats where we can come out and help do that. I've done that in tandem with professional financial planners, sometimes with an attorney. And, a lot of times when we're talking about some of the more complicated ways of gifting, obviously people's financial advisors, their families, their attorneys in some cases are going to be part of that conversation as well. And yeah, so those are some things I've seen that are very effective.
Any more questions on this part, do you think?
I think we're good. Y'all, I can get really excited if you didn't figure this out. Talking about endowments, talking about planned giving, talking about ways that we can leverage these resources. In your resource packet, there's going to be an example of what if someone gave us, I picked $300,000. What if someone gave us $300,000? We put it in an endowment. And it's an illustration of what would happen to that endowment over the next 99 years, what it would be worth in 99 years, the cumulative distributions that'd be coming out of it, and what it would continue to do for the church. So take a look at that. That'll be in your resource packet, and we'd love for you to take a look at that as you have an opportunity. So Bonnie, I feel like I'm mindful of the time. We've got 22 minutes left, and there's still one really big funding source that's just waiting to be unlocked. Maybe a church's most valuable, most underutilized resource. Wondering maybe we could talk about that.
Absolutely. I think it's one of the biggest kept secrets, and it's just waiting to be unlocked. The problem is nobody knows where the key is, and the key is unique to every church, and that's your most underappreciated asset. That is your complete campus, including things not just like your buildings, but it might include your parking lot. It might include undeveloped acreage. It might include land hiding out in the middle of nowhere that someone gave you 25 years ago and you still haven't figured out what you want to do with it. But yes, best kept secret, your church campus.
So look at that image on the screen, and I mean, so I can't tell if the money's flying in or if the money's flying out. It looks a little bit like the church where I worship, where it seems like money's flying out for the building all the time. And kind of what you're talking about is things that we can do to make sure that money is flowing in, that the building becomes an asset, not a liability, so to speak. We've got some great partners in the conference who help us with those things. If you're not familiar with them, Wesley Community Development Corporation, which works with us closely here in Huntersville, they are helping churches reimagine their space, and their contact info is also in the resource packet. Take a look at it. If you're thinking of kind of doing a deep dive on some of the property use, they've got some great services, some great success stories of how they have helped churches turn their building from a liability into an asset that's not draining money, but that's generating money. And they can be a great help to folks as well. Bonnie, I know you've got some interest in this as well. And you and I have read and reread a book together, The Coming Revolution in Church Economics, Why Tithes and Offerings Are No Longer Enough, What You Can Do About It. Could you just tell us a bit why this book has had such an impact on you?
Oh, we don't have enough time. But this is the book, guys, and please make a note of it. The core point of this is about a church plant in Arkansas, Little Rock, Arkansas, in the absolute worst zip code in Little Rock, Arkansas, intentionally planting a church where there isn't any money. Oh, well, we've done that before. The difference is they knew it going in and they planned for it. I don't want to give away everything about it completely, But they figured out that they didn't just want to have a church building, they wanted to have a campus that provided work and jobs. They eventually were able to buy $100,000 leftover Kmart abandoned building and started slicing it up into businesses where businesses could employ local people, where they could receive rental income, where they could make a difference in the standard of living. It is a massive concept. Now, that's the good news. It's really cool to read. And after roughly 20 plus years, they are generating now 30% of their budget from this concept.
So most of us aren't church plants in a poor neighborhood, Bonnie. Church I go to isn't like that. So does this
You're
apply to
so
the rest of
right.
us?
You're absolutely right. But how many of us are experiencing that the neighborhood around our beloved home church is continuing to change? It may not look the way it did when our church was founded or when our church was revitalized last, or we may no longer reflect completely or fully the neighborhood that we find ourselves in. You see, the average age of United Methodist congregation is running now about 60. That's average. Some parts of our buildings aren't being utilized. Don't raise your hands, but I'm willing to bet if I asked for a hand show, you all could tell me about the cold hallway that you hate paying the electric bill on, that just isn't being used anymore. Classrooms and nurseries that are underutilized. Maybe our congregation has shrunk a little. Maybe they've retired. Maybe they've moved to Florida. I'm feeling that today. It's because it's so cold. So we've got some assets that we haven't thought about in this way. Not that we want to be a church plant, but what can we do to use what God has already gifted to us? It's already here. We don't have to go invest for it. We don't have to build it. We don't have to reset it. What can we do?
So Bonnie, I
Hey,
heard.
this is Pam with Biltmore.
Hey, Pam,
Could I share some of our story?
by all means.
Biltmore's congregation has gone, the pandemic really hit us like everybody else. We lost members. We're down to about 25 active members. And during the pandemic, we had to make a decision. We couldn't pay the bills and we did zero mission work. But that's where our heart was, hospitality and mission. We made the tough decision to sell our building right here in Asheville. And the foundation's been a huge part of that. We received 3.8 million, I think. AJ probably knows those numbers better than I do. It gets away from us. I like to say we're homeless, but we always show up. We have $4 million sitting in the foundation from the sale of our building. And I think we meet tomorrow, AJ, over Zoom to talk to you about the interest we've earned on the diversified funds. And that's another point I want to make. There's other funds other than the diversified that are maybe a little bit more less risk. Well, the interest we're earning on that 4 million, we are so busy serving the homeless, serving the poor, serving you don't even want to get me started, the babies, the old people. We're so busy with the money we're earning from that 4 million that we wish we could clone ourselves. I mean, that's just a success story. We don't have a home yet. The Asheville market is insane, but Wesley CDC is helping us with that. We're just hoping someday we get an opportunity to find a new home and it falls through. And we've been through this and we just keep praying and praying and praying. It'll happen. It'll happen someday. But in the meantime, that 4 million is sitting in the bank. I won't say we haven't had to use some of that interest to pay our bills. There's 25 of us. We have a full-time pastor and 2 very, very part-time staff. But I think we're a success story. And I think we're one of the few that's taken the leap to actually make that tough decision. Beautiful sanctuary, beautiful building. We all loved it. And toughest decisions we've ever had to make. But now we're happy. We're talking about what more can we do, or how can we do more, and not how are we going to pay the light bill. Like I said, the foundation was a huge part of that, and helped us work through that, and helped us design a system where we could actually go out there and be the hands and feet of Christ, and not have to worry about the light bill and worry about the water bill, and you know all the things we worry about, picking up the garbage. But I'd just like to share that, because I don't think there's too many of us out there that have sold our actual church buildings, and finding a way to worship and stay together, and doing more mission work than we've ever done.
Pam, is it a little more fun to be the hands and feet of Jesus rather than spend all your time worrying about how to keep the doors open and the lights on?
Exactly. That's the decision we made. We wanted to be the hands and feet of Christ, and not wringing our hands about, are we going to have enough offering to keep the lights on?
Pam, I think you are one of the bravest congregations I've heard about. And I just want to compliment you for that God-given vision to release what was holding you back and go into the joy of what you wanted to do in the first place.
Well,
So,
some days we wish he would speak a little louder than he does, or give us a kick in the rear. But he's there. He's guiding us. We'll make it.
and in his perfect time.
Exactly.
And that is a big, I know exactly that beautiful, I know that beautiful church. It is, oh man, oh, you gave up a lot.
Stained glass
Tiffany.
windows.
I mean, Tiffany, if I recall, correct?
Mm-mm.
No? Okay. Wanted it to be. Anyway.
Not quite, but there's,
Well,
yeah.
they're that pretty.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, and so not all of us are called to be as brilliantly sacrificial as Biltmore was, but we do have, I just want to say, you've got something that you can do. There's some things that you can do. Yes, you can look at an underutilized children or youth wing that you haven't used in 10 or 15 years. And what if you could rent that out for after school care? What if you could work with a faith-based school? That these things are popping up everywhere. That might be an option you wish to choose. And the first thing I hear is, oh, no, we can't do that. We're a nonprofit. IRS will come get us and drag us away in chains. Not exactly. The IRS says you can receive up to 20% of your church budget in rental income. Let me repeat that. That came from Mark King, our treasurer. I checked. I'm putting him on record. Up to 20% of your church budget can receive rental income without changing anything. And if you were to go beyond that, there are ways to handle that. There are completely wonderful ways to do that. So there are just a lot of things. One thing I'm working with the church right now, I have a church for less than $20,000. They can turn their beautiful kitchen, I mean, it's gorgeous, into a grade A, pass all the inspections ghost kitchen. Do y'all know that caterers and restaurants need extra space to prep for the parties and all the different holidays? They will rent your kitchen.
Food trucks needed.
Well, food truck's another ball game, but let's talk about that ghost kitchen. You're talking, if you got it going, you're talking between $800 and $2,000 a month for ghost kitchen work. I know of a couple churches in my backyard. They rent out their very nice turnaround space parking lot to truckers to park their trucks. Who'd have thunk, right?
Bonnie, this is so this is a little new. And maybe we're thinking about renting out space. I don't even know how we figure out what to charge. Like, what's a good rate? How do we figure that out?
Well, it's not in the book. I went looking for it in the book. And since it wasn't in the book, and after talking to my friends who are commercial realtors, I decided to create a formula for us to use. And it's a plug-in formula where it takes your numbers, whatever you're spending on your gas, heat, electric, janitorial, you plug in all your expense numbers, you divide it by your square footage of your total operation, and then by the square footage of what you want to rent out. So you know what your cost is. See, commercial real estate is not designed for an already built building with all the goodies attached. Commercial real estate is basically renting you the air. Okay, I had quite a lot of leases in my time. I know about renting air. So I put together this formula, and it's customizable to each church. No biggie, you figure it out. And so that's not in the book, but wish it had been.
Bonnie,
Bonnie, go ahead, Bob.
just one quick thing. Hendersonville First in the session today on Creation Care Ministry, I learned that they have, looks like an acre or two of roof space that's solar now. But in addition, I know they've done some work on leasing out space. I'm not aware in detail of it, but I know they do it.
Bob, to springboard on what you're saying, a lot of churches are doing that, and you don't have to go it alone. Almost every district superintendent's office has a pattern lease for you to consider using, because we, of course, want to make sure that our tenants will comply with our safe sanctuaries policy, which is a requirement. It's just already a bit of a template for you. So if you're thinking that you might have that opportunity, or you want to develop that opportunity, definitely connect up with your district office. The district building and location team is supposed to review that for you. And not to say no, it's not a Dr. No committee, please. I'm on one here. We are so happy because 99% of the time we get to say yes the first time around. So we love seeing stuff come through. There's a lot of opportunity about it. You just want to do it well, and you want to give it a try. I would recommend not necessarily taking on a big giant lease to begin with, but take a look at, what if you had a morning program in a children's wing, but nothing going on in the afternoon? What about after school care? I can speak for a fact in Greensboro, we do not have enough slots. There is more demand than there is slots. So look at something that is already, you could just fill in a spot there and work with a partner, maybe a Y or some other faith-based group. So there's lots that you can do with that.
Bonnie, I would, so again, this is new. I need some training. Like, how do I feel like we've just kind of scratched the surface here. Can we get some training around how we leverage
Absolutely.
this?
Plans are in the works. Plans are in the works to provide a weekend training based on the book plus the plug-in formula. I will not leave that out, somewhere in your district. So if this sounds like something you want or think you might be willing to explore, we want you to be looking for that from your district news. That is in the works behind the scenes, and that's all I get to say right now, but stay tuned.
That's fantastic. And again, that's going to be, we're pointing to that in your resource packet as well. So much of the information that we have shared tonight, contact information, grants, endowments, investments, building resources. Shawnee, thanks for sharing that in the chat a few times. You can get it there. It's also going to be emailed to you following the session. So good information in there. Friends, we've got about 5 minutes left. And Bonnie, I'm halfway amazed that we covered most of the material that we wanted to cover tonight. But obviously, you've got some questions that you've come with, maybe things that we've talked about that have sparked something. Are there any other questions or conversation relative to things that we've talked about this evening?
Could I just say one thing real quick about the resource packet? If you found yourself in this session without registering for it, go back and fill out the registration form and check this box, because the emails that are going out with the resource packet will be based on that registration.
Great. Thanks, Shawnee.
Yes.
Thank you for being such good resources.
You're very welcome.
If I could ask one quick question, there was, Bonnie, I believe you mentioned connecting with the district office regarding how to make the best use out of your space. And you mentioned a particular area within the district office, but I didn't quite catch the name of that.
Yeah, let me repeat that for you. Thanks for the good question. I was referring everyone to their district office. If you don't have a lease that has been approved by your district, you don't have a pattern lease because this is new to you, your district office should be able to give you a template lease. Okay, so that was what I wanted you to reach out to your district for. In the district committee structure of every district, there is something called the building and location team, and their job is to help the district superintendent with all things dealing with buildings and leases and sale of properties and things of that sort. Again, they're not a no committee, they're a yes committee. Their job is to review and protect you. That's all, to make sure Safe Sanctuaries is included in a lease and it meets legal requirements and stuff like that. Our committee is composed of realtors, attorneys, insurance people. They even let us on it, et cetera, so that we can help do things better. So that committee, all your lease has just sort of gone through and looked at to make sure it's covering all the bases for you, to protect you, so you don't get sued for having a terrible lease. Does that help?
Yes. Does that also include for if you're looking to lease out your parsonage?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank
Yes.
you.
Call the district. That's what they're there for.
Other questions, other things that folks might want to have some curiosity about this evening?
Hey, this is Brian Beal. I was just curious back on that first slide that showed the depressing contribution rates. Are those based on the percentage of church members? What's the base of that?
I'd have to refer you to the Sobel and Company accounting firm report. You can find it on the internet. If you'll, Shawnee, if
Okay.
you can possibly get back to that first slide, it'd be great. That is in the Sobel and Company is in the book, The Coming Revolution. It's cited in there, and I went and found that. I understand it's based on the general population,
Okay.
not based on church.
Yeah.
So based on general population.
Yeah, that was the question. Thanks.
I think that's my understanding.
Very good. Well, friends, it is 7:29. I know some of you are probably signed up for other sessions that you may be going right into. Thank you for your time tonight. Thank you for your engagement. If you would like to follow up with anything that Bonnie and I have shared with you, our contact info is readily available. Please send us an email. Be very, very glad to follow up one-on-one with anybody who needs additional information. So y'all have been great. It's been fun to spend this evening with you. Grateful for you, grateful for your ministry, grateful for your engagement in the life of your local church. So thank you so much for who you are and for what you do. I'm glad to be with you all tonight.